Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
Now, just remember that this thing isn't as black as it appeared. I have some news for you, folks. I was just talking to old man Potter, and he's guaranteed cash payments to the bank. The bank's going to reopen next week.
But, George, I got my money here. Did he guarantee this place?
Well, no, Charlie, I didn't even ask him. We don't need Potter over here.
And I'll take mine now.
No, but you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
I got $242 in here, and $242 isn't going to break anybody.
Okay, Tom. All right. Here you are. You sign this. You get your money in 60 days.
60 days?
Well, now, that's what you agreed to when you bought your shares.
Tom, did you get your money?
No.
Well, I did. Old man Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar for every share you got.
50 cents on the dollar?
Yes, cash.
Well, what do you say?
Welcome to Financial Strategies with Andrew Agemy in Connecticut and Daniel Agemy in Colorado.
It all started in 2008. It started before that. Started before the Lehman crash. But this is when people realized there was a problem. We had the great financial crisis in 2008 where people lost a lot. Their assets came down 60%. The S&P came down 60%. 3 million houses were foreclosed on. Unemployment got up to 10%. We forget about the pain people felt. We forget about the sorrow people went through losing everything. And bankers who caused the crisis got bonuses. The banks got bailed out, and the people paid for it. They paid for it through taxes, and they paid through it with their jobs, and they paid for it with their homes. In 2008, a white paper came out written by Satoshi Nakamoto, and this was called the Bitcoin white paper. It was a new financial system. It was a new way to transmit money peer to peer from individual to individual without having greedy bankers involved, without having Wall Street involved. It was a new option. It was a new way to see money built by and for the people. I'm Daniel Agemy.
And I'm Andrew Agemy, and welcome to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, because people don't know what people don't know. Today, we're talking about CBDCs. And Daniel, man, I couldn't help but smile when you're going through that rendition, because you're absolutely right. People forget the pain that everybody went through. But more importantly, because things have been progressively better for the most part since 2008, 2009, people think that everything is normal, everything is good. But that's what we're going to talk about on today's show, is that there's things going on behind the scene. And, the digital currency of Bitcoin that was started for the people, by the people, is being taken. And there's some other things, that the whole digital currency scene is, there's some things going on there that we need to take a look at today. And for those that don't know what CBDC is, we're talking about central bank digital currencies. And Daniel, central bank, that's not a federal organization, right? The central bank?
Well, let's go back to 2008. So the average person was not very happy, right?
Yeah.
You remember that.
I do.
You remember people coming in your office and crying.
Right.
telling you that they thought they thought this was supposed to go one way, and they needed help because their advisors told them the wrong things. You met
Right.
a lot of people,
And
you
the,
saw a lot of sorrow. We forget about that. But
yeah.
probably maybe the most egregious part is that just the regular individual, knowingly or unknowingly, is the one that bailed out the whole system. We say the government bailed out the system. Well, the government did two things. They collected taxes from you and they printed money.
Right.
And so when we print money, that's an inflation. That's a tax. It's a
Right.
tax people don't complain about because they don't see it right away. But as we see things go up in value,
Price.
when
Yeah.
we see
Yeah.
prices go up, we see, car prices go up. You need to buy a car. You need to buy a house. You need to pay your rent. You need to
Right.
buy groceries. These things going up, these are consequences. These are second and third order consequences from the
Yeah.
bailouts that people are suffering now, how many years later?
Right.
The taxes to cover that, right? And so the Federal Reserve is kind of the central banks, right, are kind of secret organizations, especially the US Federal Reserve. Nobody really knows who owns it. The banks, the big banks own it, but nobody really knows who own it. And it's supposed to be independent of Treasury, right? It's
Right.
supposed to be independent of US Treasury, but they kind of work hand in hand. When the Treasury needs money, they issue bonds, and then the Federal Reserve buys those bonds magically,
Yeah.
and then Treasury receives money, right?
Yeah. The Federal Reserve
Um,
is not a federal. It's not a federal organization. That's where the central banks are coming from, basically.
correct, correct. They're supposed to be completely independent of each other.
Yeah.
Um, and that was set up that way so that if the government is the Federal Reserve, if the government can just print money, then it would be like, the old kings that would debase their coins, right?
Mm.
That would collect gold tax receipts and then would remint those gold coins, but put other metals in them and kind of debase. That's where the term debasement comes from, because these kings, they
Uh,
cover, they take off the edges of the coins and collect gold, or they remint them with less real gold in them, and that's how they debased back in the day. Now, Janet Yellen or whoever the Treasury Secretary calls up Jerome Powell or whoever the Fed says, and I need some money. We're gonna have an auction. Please buy them, right? I'm sure it's not exactly how it happens, but that's the printing money thing. It's not really printing money, but it's this digital um, debiting of creating money.
all right. So digital things really are interesting at how they're working toward all these things. And if you've just picked up listening to us, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, and today's topic is CBDC, central bank digital currencies. And we have a paper that we'd love to give you today that goes along with today's show, and it's called "The State of CBDCs." And we'd love to put this in your hands so that you can get educated and see what we're talking about here and why it's pertinent. We're talking about in today's show, we're going to be talking about what this means to you. And we'd love to put this in your hands. So you can have it by calling us at 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616. No obligation for your free copy of the paper on central bank digital currency, CBDC. Daniel, people think that everything is going well, and but in the background, there's a lot of things going on. Is where this all comes from, right? I mean, you're talking about the government prints the money, so to speak, and auctions it, through with the treasuries and that kind of thing. But you know, there's the banking system is fragile, and we don't really know it. And that goes along with all this stuff, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. So, in 2008, when Satoshi issued that white paper, it was because the people were upset. The financial system was not serving the people. It's serving the bankers, right?
Right.
How
Right.
did the people who caused the financial crisis that got over leveraged, that gave mortgages to people who couldn't afford them? Lehman Brothers was leveraged some ridiculous amount. It was just complete irresponsibility on those people. Now they are one of the few financial industry institutions that actually paid the consequences, but there was only one person in the whole thing that went to jail, right? And Wall Street bankers got bailed out, and they got bonuses for it.
Yeah.
So
That's terrible.
Satoshi, who is a who we don't know who Satoshi is, if it's a group of people, if it's an individual, or what, came out with this alternative digital currency. And it's not controlled by any central entity. It's controlled by people, and anyone can participate in that and secure the network and help this to be able to give people financial freedom to transact whenever they want. They don't need banks to be open. It doesn't need to be business hours. You don't need a regulative body, a bank, a government to say it's okay to send transactions. It's all peer to peer. And what ended up is happening is, the current system that we're using is called SWIFT, and it was developed in the 70s. So we're using 70-year-old technology in our banking system. And central banks are saying, this doesn't make a lot of sense that we're using this. We can't send money on a Sunday. We can't do these things. Banks need to be open. We can't control how much money is in your bank account. It's kind of hard to set monetary policy, right?
Right.
Like, the way our current monetary system works is what's happening right now. There's inflation. So we're raising rates. Why is the Federal Reserve raising rates? Well, they raise rates to kind of dampen demand, right?
Right. Right.
Slow down demand. Well, for two ways. One is it makes things more expensive. So if a company's looking at, we're going to do this acquisition, we're going to go out, we're going to create factories,
Right.
and they look at price of capital and they say, oh, it's going to cost us 6% to borrow the money to build this, and we're going to only return an 8% return on it. Maybe we'll just keep the money in the treasury and earn 5%,
Right.
earn 4%, and we won't do this expansion. Now, all the materials that would take to build this factory, there's less demand for them, which can
Right.
bring the prices down. The other thing is, you as an individual, if you're not earning anything in your bank account, you're incentivized to go buy things with the money.
Right.
If you're earning 5% on your money and you say, well, I can leave the money in my bank and earn 5%, or I can buy this thing, it's a little bit harder decision than it is if you weren't earning anything on it, right?
Mhm.
But this is a very slow process. It's a very difficult process, right? It's like the Wizard of Oz. It's levers. There's a guy in the back booth pulling levers and things like that.
Right.
It's not really that powerful. The powerful part is because we believe it's powerful. And so as long as people believe the Federal Reserve, it works.
Right.
But they're saying, oh, we might need something that actually is a little bit more powerful. This is where central bank digital currencies come in.
Ooh. All right. Well, I see this. It's time for us to take a break here, and we're gonna, we got a cliffhanger there, right? Okay, so we've got, where central bank digital currencies come into play. We're going to talk more about that when we come back. In the meantime, if you picked up listening to us, you're listening to Financial Strategies, Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today we have a book that we'd love to give to you called The Pirates of Manhattan, written by Barry Dyke. And this book will, the thing on here says systematically plundering the American consumer and how to protect against it. So we'd love to put this book in your hand to be able to help you understand what happened in 2008 and some of those different things. And we're going to be talking more about that today. But if you like this book, be one of the first 5 first-time callers at 800-725 7616. 800-725-7616 for your free copy of The Pirates of Manhattan by Barry Dyke. Call now.
This is Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
Recently, I had a call from one of my clients who was wanting to know. She'd been to a seminar workshop about CBDCs. And Andrew, she says, I was at this workshop with 4,000 people, and this central bank digital currency is going to be coming into play. And what can I do? Should I buy silver? Should I buy gold? What should I do? And I said, I talked to her about the basics of it, and that's why we created this show today. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today we're talking about central bank digital currencies and CBDCs. And when she asked you about CBDCs, you probably thought it was some weird kind of marijuana, right? Some marijuana oil you could put on your body and take care of yourself, get nice and soothing.
Well, yeah, when she just gave me those initials, and I was like, what is that? Well, I know about this, digital currencies and central bank wanting to be able to take that over, and but when and how and why, and that's what we need to talk about, right?
Yeah, we already have a digital currency. Like the US dollar is already a digital currency. It's just not a very good one. And the the central bankers, the treasury, they don't have a lot of control over it, right? So like think about how difficult it was to get the stimulus checks out after COVID, right? They were
Right.
sending it to dead people. They were sending it to addresses where people do not live anymore. This was a very fast, very compared to what the government normally does, very fast,
Right.
very efficient of getting that money out. And it still took a couple of months for some people to get those checks. So when Bitcoin came out, the governments looked at this and they said, one, this is scary because we can't control it.
Yeah.
This is putting the power in the people's hands. The people have full control over this.
We don't
we
want
can't
that.
sanction people. We can't stop people from transmitting to each other. So they started working on their own digital currencies.
Right.
And China is a perfect example, because if you went to the Olympics in China, they were giving out free money. All you had to do was download their app, and they gave you the digital you want, or the digital RMB. And the idea was, this is their central bank digital currency, and they want people to get used to using it. Now, why do governments love these things so much? Because they're in full control over it. Okay. Right now, it's difficult to, like we said, you got to mail checks to people. So if there's a disaster and GDP is going to go down, central banks can just send everybody money.
Wow.
They can give you a universal basic income. They can say there was a disaster in this part of the world. Everyone in this area code, everyone in this district will get X amount of money, and they could give that for whatever period of time. It's completely programmable. It's programmable money.
Right.
They could say, if you don't use the stimulus we give you by a certain amount of time, it will expire. So they give you a $10,000 check, and if you don't use it in the 30 days they allot you, the $10,000 expires. It disappears out of your account. Think about how amazing that would be for central bank planning. If they want to boost the economy, they give everybody some money, and it expires if you don't use it. People will use the money. People won't save it. People won't save it for a rainy day. They will spend it, and you'll get the economy going again, right?
Right.
If you're a student and the government decides, do you know what? We want Joey to earn a nice interest rate on the money that he saves. They can go and they can say, Joey's got $5,000 in his bank account. We're going to give him a 10% interest rate. And Joey collects $10,000 or 10% on that money, right?
Right.
Completely programmable, whatever you want. It sounds really good, like these things that you could do. You can give stimulus, you can help people in economic
Yeah.
disasters, you can give it to poor people, you can help students earn interest on the money. There's another side to it too. If they think, you've got too much money in your bank account, your money could expire. Or if they don't like some Facebook messages you put out, your money could expire, or they could deduct a fee, or you could get a negative interest rate. Okay.
Right.
China is also experimenting with this because they have a social credit score.
Mm.
And if you don't meet the social credit score, like you're a smoker, that's a really bad thing on China's social credit score. If you smoke, you get a negative. And if you get a negative, you can't ride the transportation system.
Wow.
You can't get rent. See, so there's other things that it starts looking like that book, 1984, right?
Yeah. With
Um,
control.
if you say the wrong thing, if you talk to the wrong person,
Yeah.
things stop working. Now you can't buy groceries, you can't pay your rent, you can't ride the train system. Or if you make too much money, maybe you get a negative interest rate,
Uh-huh.
right? And
Right.
so what it allows is it allows governments to have full control over their economy. We were talking about how they raise and lower rates to try to control the economy. And it's kind of a joke. It's kind of just like the Wizard of Oz in the booth with
Right.
just some hand controls making a big scary face.
Right.
It only works when people believe it. If once they get into these digital currencies, it's actual real things. They can goose the economy.
Yeah.
They can make you spend your money because it will expire if you don't spend it, right? They can control interest rates instantly in your bank account. They can give money out to get people to spend it. They can take money back if they think you owe taxes, or they think that you are doing, you're adding too much carbon. You've been
Yeah.
driving too much, and so we're going to deduct $10,000 out of your bank account for a carbon tax because you've been driving too much, or you had too many glasses of wine. You've been spending too much money at buying wine. We're going to
Yeah.
give you whatever it is,
They
and it
say. Yeah.
changes depending on the environment, right?
Right. Right. Who's in control, who's in office, so those kinds of things. Kind of scary from that standpoint. The way that I see it is that, the government never gives us something without taking something away. So on the one side, it sounds like really good and making things easier on us, but on the other side, we're giving up something for that. So you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. And today we're talking about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And we have a paper today that is right along those same lines, called The State of CBDCs. And we'd love to be able to put that in your hands so you can learn more about this and be able to understand this and what this means to you so you can be prepared. We're not just trying to scare you. We're not just trying to give you, just feed you knowledge, but we want you to be able to be prepared for the things that are coming around and be able to have a stress-free retirement. You can have that paper by calling us at 800-725-7616. 800-7616. Ask for it by name, the paper on CBDCs. Daniel, this is kind of crazy with this, right? So Bitcoin comes into play, which is the first digital currency, and then the governments around the world see this digital currency. They don't like it because they're losing control over money and over people in this way. So they want to be able to take control back, and they say, well, let's come up with our own digital currencies that we can use for our purposes. And it's not just the U.S., but it's other countries around the world. And like you said, China's already doing it from that standpoint. So what else do we need to know about this?
So this paper we're giving away breaks down. It's from 2022, but it breaks down kind of where countries are in the development of these things. And I think people will be surprised how many countries are working on these central bank digital currencies. Um, it's the most amazing thing for a central bank to have these
Mm-hmm.
currencies.
Mm-hmm.
The things that programmable money, like what if you're a central banker, what could be better than programmable money. You can completely change, you can get the
Right.
economy to do exactly what you want it to do when you want it to do it. So China is probably one of the countries that's most advanced on this. And here in the US, Bitcoin, you said, was the first digital currency, is the first digital asset, peer-to-peer transfer of value digitally that worked, because a lot of people had tried to do this prior to Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was the first one that worked. And then what ended up happening was Ethereum came along,
Mm.
and Ethereum is more controllable. Okay. There are bigger entities that can get involved, like BlackRock and things like that, and they can kind of turn things on and turn things off. So it's a lot more like the current monetary system. And then other protocols have been built upon that. So for example, if you want to buy a house in Hawaii, you're searching around for your house in Hawaii on the beach, and you find the perfect house in Hawaii right there on the water, and it's 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and you want to buy that. If you were shopping for shoes, or you were shopping for clothes, you're shopping forever, whatever, you could buy that on Amazon instantly and have it delivered to you. But in this situation, you have to wait till banks open, you have to wait till the attorneys open, you have to wait till the realtors open, you have to do all these things. Well, with US dollars on the Ethereum network, you can
Yeah.
transfer it anytime, any place. So you could buy that house on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock and send that money over with US dollars, get that, and then the deed transfer right over to you on the blockchain.
Wow.
So the governments are looking at that and saying, well, we could build something just like this. And so the US may be a little bit further behind than, say, China or some of these other countries. But if they wanted, they could use some of these private blockchains that have already been developed, like an Ethereum, or there's one that MIT is creating that the government's super involved with, and they could run their digital currency on that. So even though they're further behind than China or some of these other countries, the private sector is much further along. The US private sector
Yeah.
is much further along than China or some of these other countries that are already using digital currencies, central
Yeah.
bank digital currencies, or running pilots of them.
Okay. All right. Well, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is central bank digital currencies. And we have a book to go along with today's show that we'd love to be able to put in your hand. And it's called The Pirates of Manhattan. And this will be able to give you some information by Barry Dyke, and being able to give you some information on what to do and what's going on in the banking system that you may not be aware of, to be able to protect your money. A lot of people think, oh, the bank is safe. I'm going to put my money in the bank and I'll be okay. And this will help you understand that's not necessarily true. And we'll be talking more about that when we come back from break. But in the meantime, call us at 800-725-7616 for your free copy. The first 5 first-time callers at 800-725-7616 gets a copy of Pirates of Manhattan. Call now.
You're locked on to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
Maria was in the grocery store, and she was grocery shopping. She was picking out all the wonderful, beautiful vegetables and fruits on the beautiful island of Cyprus. She walked out of the grocery store, and she saw her friend, Georgia. And Georgia was in a huge line, a line wrapped around the block. And she said to Georgia, Georgia, what are you doing in this line? And Georgia said to her, the banks are all closing down, and we're in line to the ATM so we can get our money, because we don't know when the banks will open back up. I'm Daniel Agemy.
And I'm Andrew Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Daniel, that's a crazy story. It's standing in line with ATM. I think the ATM machine would run out of money, right? But that would be really scary to me, and that's actually what happened, right?
Yeah, it's a true story. Um, Lots of people have stories like that from 2012 in Cyprus when the country got over leveraged and went bankrupt, and the whole world looked and was wondering what Cyprus would do in this situation. And so the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, who is kind of the world, there's a couple organizations like this that kind of do the same job, but they're like the world's central bank. They are the lender of last resort, especially for small and emerging countries. And the IMF decided they were going to do an experiment. They had a country that got over leveraged, a beautiful country with wonderful people,
Yeah.
but they got over leveraged and they went bankrupt, and the banking system failed. And
Mm.
so the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, decided that they were going to do the first bail in on mass scale.
Wow.
And early 2013, they proceeded with this bail in. And what ended up happening was, if you had more than 100 euros in your bank account, or 100,000, I'm sorry, euros in your bank account, half of that, 50%, disappeared. And that
Wow.
was here in the US, we did bailouts where the government decided they were going to bail out the banking system.
Hmm.
And Cyprus, they experimented with this thing called bail-ins, where they take the customer's deposits and they use that to bail out the bank account. You don't
Wow.
get a choice
Yeah.
in this. So 50% people who, and then Cyprus took another 10% of the money
Wow.
on top of that for people who had over 100,000 euros. If you had less than 100,000, I think it was 7% of that went to the government of Cyprus. And then they restricted those ATMs. Those lines were there because the banks allowed you to take a tiny, tiny fraction, what they considered was enough to live off of a day, a tiny fraction of your money to try to live off of. So you couldn't even like go to the United States. You couldn't go somewhere else because unless you had
Had no
cash
money.
or gold or
Yeah.
something like that at the time. Maybe you had some Bitcoin and you were able to take your money and go to the United States, or another country nearby. But the banking system shut down.
Mm.
And until the world got, because there's their version of FDIC insurance, until the world got very irate about them not honoring their insurance deposit funds. They didn't even use that. They just said, this is the bail and this is what happens. You're going to bail out the banking system.
Wow. So
Um,
the depositors bailed out the banking system is what they did.
that's
That's why it's a bailed
exactly
in.
that's exactly what
But
happened.
I thought that the money was the depositors. How can they take the depositors' money?
No, that is something that is, it's kind of a myth that the bank is holding your money like in a vault, or the bank is holding your money. When you there's not we talk about investment contracts all the time.
Yeah.
You buy a bond, you buy this, you buy that, and there's a contract stating what you get in return. There's not, when you put your money in the bank, there's not a contract.
Wow.
It's the bank's money. There's not a
Wow.
contract that says you'll get, this is your money, we're holding. It's their money. If they lose it, they
Yeah.
lost your money. Now,
Wow.
we have faith in the banking system because there's FDIC insurance. So if you have more than $250,000 in the bank, um, you need to talk to us, because that's not safe. That's far riskier than you could ever imagine. People will
Wow.
think like,
Yeah.
this is riskier, that is money in the bank over that FDIC limit is more risky than you could imagine. Why is it more risky than you imagine? Well, 2014, after this whole bail-in Cyprus, the G20 countries decided bail-ins, and the US is a G20 country. It's the largest 20 countries. That's what the G20 is. Decided this was a great success. This was an amazing feat, and they loved it. And so they decided the G20, we're going to put this into practice, where the next crisis, the next banking crisis, there won't be bailouts, there'll be bail-ins. And that's why I say if you're over that FDIC limit, there's no hope for that money. Now you say, well, banks are stronger. I hear this all the time. Banks are stronger than they've ever been, right? They're not leveraged up like they used to be. They're not leveraged up like they were in the great financial crisis.
Yeah.
But there's something called a derivative, and the derivatives were kind of what caused the financial crisis in 2008. If people have watched The Big Short, they kind of explain what derivatives are and how derivatives cause the price. But derivatives, and we're going to talk about derivatives after this break.
Yeah. So you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is CBDC, central bank digital currencies. We have a paper to go along with today's show because you want to make sure that your money is protected. It's not just what you make on your money that counts; it's that you are able to keep your money. And how many bad advisors does it take to ruin your retirement? The answer is one. We have a paper that will help you be able to understand if you have the wrong financial advisor. 10 warning signs of working with the wrong financial advisor. Ask for it by name. Wrong financial advisor. Call us at 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616 for your free copy. You're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy because people don't know what people don't know. Daniel, that's scary how people can be their money, especially over $250,000, even under $250,000 with the FDIC. In my mind, that's not as protected as it could be, should be, for a lot of reasons, which I'm sure you're going to get into. But as we look at this, what do we need to be aware of? How is things different? Why is it not safe? All kinds of questions come to mind.
So 2008, as they went through banking reform, one of the laws that was passed was something called Dodd-Frank. And it's a super ugly, weirdly worded, difficult to understand bill. But one of the things that it did was it changed the way that derivatives look on banks' balance sheets.
Mm.
And what it does is it puts derivative liabilities ahead of depositors.
Wow. So that derivatives are get paid off before depositors do, huh?
Yeah. So the depositors get whatever's left over.
Wow.
And so when people say stuff like the banking system is so strong, the difficulty is no one really knows the liabilities behind derivatives.
Mm.
So JP Morgan is pretty good at hiding these and making it difficult to understand. They're the biggest culprit of it on their financial statements. But the estimate is it's above $1 quadrillion.
Wow.
No, not wow. This is like people can't understand what $1 trillion is.
Yeah.
This is
quadrillion.
1,000 trillion dollars. That's what a quadrillion is. Okay. So there's not enough money. There's not enough money to cover this. Right. So the non-reported liabilities, right, in these derivatives is astronomical. And so or I should say, when the next financial crisis happens, because people think like each crisis we fix the problem. We haven't fixed any of the problems. They stack on top of each other. That's partly why these central bank currencies come into play, because they know that what worked in 2008 won't work again.
Right.
So, the Federal Reserve, Wall Street, Treasury Secretary trying to bail out the banking system in 2008. And they're going knocking on Congress doors saying, we need money, right? We need money for that. We need to do this. And Congress said no. And then we saw it was this financial crisis wasn't just a US thing. If they didn't bail out the system, it was going to spread into the whole world. And so they went and knocked on Congress' door again. We need money. We need money. Do you know how much money they wanted?
No.
About $800 billion. They didn't even want $1 trillion. Okay. That's what they were able. That was a lot of money at the time. That was what they needed to bail out the system.
Yeah.
Today for COVID to bail out everything in there, they spent over $10 trillion.
10 trillion?
We have scheduled deficits. Okay. The US Treasury just came out and they have scheduled yearly deficits of $2 trillion a year, 1.8, 1.9 trillion dollars a year. This is not counting if there's a crisis. This is not counting if there's a pandemic. This is not counting if there's a war. This is just the regular budget
stuff. Yeah.
So the numbers have gotten insane. And this is why, the central bankers of the world are looking at a different financial system, because what worked to bail out the financial system in 2008 will not work again. So they need a better system that they can control, that they can move over to. And that's where the central bank digital currencies are coming into play.
Wow. Crazy. That's just crazy. Boggles my mind. Well, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is CBDC, central bank digital currencies. And we have a book that will go along with today's show that we'd love to put in your hand. And this is called Pirates of Manhattan by Barry Dyke. And Barry, one of the things he talks about in here is Dodd-Frank and derivatives and that sort of thing. So if you want to know more detail on that, this book will help you to be able to understand that and understand what's going on here. So systematically plundering of the American consumer and how to plan and protect against it. So you can have this book by calling us at 800-725-7616 for your free copy. The first 5 first-time callers, 800-725-7616. Call now.
This is Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
Harry and Sally love the bank. They like having their money available that they can just go and take out whenever they want. So they've got $3 million invested in various forms and fashions, but they have $800,000 in the bank. Now, you might say, well, it's in the bank making zero. Well, they're making a little bit of money, because CD rates are up right now. So they're not staying ahead of inflation, but they're making more than zero right now on their $800,000. But they have it there because, hey, the bank is safe. What's better than the bank? I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy. And you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today we're talking about central bank digital currencies. And Dad, we hear a lot of people talking about how comfortable they are having these exorbitant amounts of money in the bank, right? Because it feels nice. Like, look at the bank, right?
Yeah.
There's these huge, expensive buildings. They must be doing well, right? You walk in, you could talk to somebody, although it's pretty funny. The last few times I've been in the bank, nobody actually went in and talked to the teller. They all got in line to the ATM while the bank was right open. But yeah, this can be a problem. This can be a scary thing. People think they're safe, and they're not as much as they think they are.
And one of the reasons for that is because, when you go over the FDIC limit, $250,000 per account, then it's not insured at all at that point. But then the other factor is, the banks are investing in derivatives, and should the derivatives go bad, the money goes to derivatives before it goes to the account holders. Kind of like the difference between, a bond where, you own a bond, and the money goes to bondholders before it goes to stockholders. And if there's any money left over, it goes to stockholders as far as, investments go. And so those holding derivatives are in nice shape, but the depositors are not. And there's been, you had talked about, when we were planning offline, we were talking about how there was a firewall. There used to be a firewall between banks and investment banks, and that firewall's come down now, and so banks can do investment banking and vice versa, and which puts money at risk even more so. So the bank is not what the bank used to be. In the Depression, banks, tons of banks went out of business. There was no money in Wall Street. There was no money in banks, and where people actually got money from was insurance companies. The insurance companies had money when banks did it, when Wall Street didn't. But after the Depression, all those Depression babies, right? All those people that came out of Depression, they were about the bank and putting money in the bank. And you couldn't drag them into the stock market with a team of wild horses, because the bank was safe and you could depend upon the bank, and the bank had guarantees, especially with FDI insurance, because my understanding is FDI insurance came into play after the Depression. But even with that, that is not, we're in a different world today. So you can't depend upon the bank like you used to be able to depend upon the bank.
No, no. You need to be careful. This is not, if you're willing to take on an exorbitant amount of risk by going over that $250,000 limit, that's fine. But just do your research, okay? And see what we're saying is true. Some people might be like, ha, 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 ha. They're talking about these derivatives. If they go bad, bail-ins. You know how recently that the FDIC did a test? They simulated bail-ins?
No, they did.
November of 2022.
Wow.
So this isn't like if this happens, this is when this happens.
Right.
Okay. Last November, the FDIC did simulations of bail-ins and how they would work and how people would respond. You can hear them talking about it's difficult information to find, but it's public information and you can see this. We don't know when it will happen, but we know it's going to be announced on a Friday afternoon.
Wow.
They say that because they don't want, the bank holiday. You don't want to announce this on a Monday and have people panic. You announce it on a Friday afternoon when banks are closed for Saturday and Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So it's a scary thing to think about, but you need to be aware of scary things so that you can prepare in advance, right? There's the story of the pilots who they're flying the plane and there's a problem with the landing gear and they're trying to figure it out, and the plane crashes. They were so focused on the wrong thing. They were trying to figure out why the landing gear didn't work when the landing gear was already down. But while they were doing that, the autopilot went off and no one was flying the plane and they crashed the plane because they were too focused on the wrong thing. So we don't want to be focused. If when it happens, we can be focused on it was the heat of the moment, right? And the pilots weren't focusing on the right thing because they weren't expecting this thing to happen. So you want to pay attention and prepare yourself in advance for these situations to happen. So you're not in the heat of the moment freaking out and focusing on the wrong thing. You can prepare, and there are ways to do it. There are ways to diversify. This is the best way to protect yourself is by diversification, right?
Yeah, right. You listen to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And one way to protect yourself is to be able to recognize, how many advisors does it take to ruin somebody's retirement? One. So it's important to be able to understand if you're with the wrong advisor or not, the wrong financial advisor or not. And we have a paper that we'd love to put in your hand, 10 warning signs of being with the wrong financial advisor. And you can have that for free by calling us at 800-725-7616 for your free copy. Ask for it by name, Wrong Financial Advisor. We'll be glad to get it to you. You listen to Financial Strategies and with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, because people don't know what people don't know. Daniel, as we finish up the show for today, we have a few minutes. How can people diversify, right? People need to be prepared. we don't have a ton of time to go through this, right? But one of the things is, for their banking money, it would seem to me that, maybe a credit union or the smaller hometown banks would be some of the better places to go as far as their banks go. And then it's holding things yourself, like maybe some gold, some silver, right? Some digital currency in a hardware in a hardware wallet kind of thing, where it's not online anywhere. It's actually in your possession, right? Doing this, having some cash in the house wouldn't hurt from that standpoint. Being involved in policy, insurance companies, whether annuities or life insurances, because that's they're involved with the private sector, and the private sector's job is to make money rather than to spend money or to take money like the government, right? So in my mind, it's like you're doing a lot of these different things that are safeguarding your money a little bit more, are significantly more than the bank. Am I on the right track?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will say, ha ha ha, central bank digital currencies. I just won't use it. And when there's a good central bank digital currency, the banking system doesn't want to go away, but they won't be needed, because you could just have a account with the Federal Reserve. It's all digital.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, right, they're in for you. What do you need the bank for anymore? It's all digital. You're not depositing cash. You're not depositing checks, right? What do you need the bank for anymore? So the banking system obviously does not want to become obsolete. And I'm sure the central banks will work with keeping them.
Right.
But they're not needed anymore. And people will say, well, I just won't use that central bank digital currency. Well, if the banks are trying to simulate, or I'm sorry, if the FDIC is simulating bail-ins, and you can check with your bank, if they go go bust, what happens to your money over the 250 FDIC limit? You ask them what happens to the money. It's not your money, it's their money. And it says that you will receive something in return, the contract for your money. So what could that something be?
Digital currency.
Well, it could be stock in the new bank. You want that in place of your money, or it could be a central bank digital currency. And that could be a way where they get people to use it. China did it a different way, where they're giving it out to try to get people using it. There could be a banking crisis. There could be different things like this. And you're kind of, you get nothing or you get this. You tell me which one you're going to pick.
Right.
Nothing or this new currency. So when people say to me, well, I just won't use it, this is funny. But what you're talking about with this diversification actually gives you a little bit more options, because the best way to diversify, right, would be to own physical things. So you own outright land, but not in the US, because that's not diversification. So go buy some in Switzerland and Sweden, buy some in Argentina, buy some in the US, buy some in the Caribbean, buy some in Australia. The difficulty is this is not realistic for most people.
Right.
You have to do a lot of research, not only understanding the jurisdictions and the government, the law, and all these kinds of things, but the funds that would be needed to do this is not realistic for more people. And so that's where we get into, you don't want to just own all land. That's not diversified, especially in one country.
Yeah.
You don't want to just own all gold. That's not diversification. In the Great Depression, they came knocking on the doors of people to get their gold, right?
Right.
So you need it to be diversified. Like you said, I agree with you. You got some cash, you got some gold and silver. Silver is a better tradable asset if the unforeseen happens, the crazy happens. We're not predicting that. We're not saying this. We're just giving people information so they can make smart decisions.
Right.
Silver is actually a better asset because it's more divisible. You got a piece of gold, a gold coin, that when all this goes down, it's worth $20,000. That's not going to be that helpful to you,
right?
Because what are you going to? You can't trade it for anything. So gold and silver, diversified real estate, like you said. The Great Depression, it was something like 38% of banks went bust.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas insurance companies, we have not been able to find one where someone lost their money in the insurance company. So we don't know if that's the way it will happen again, but we
Right.
know that they don't use the same type of leverage that the banking
Right.
system does. What fancy offices do you see these insurance companies have? These every street corner, this beautiful office that you come in that costs millions and millions of dollars, right? So they're taking your money and investing it instead of buying these huge
Like banks are. Right.
banks that there's just nobody in it. How did they
Right.
pay for that?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Wow. Good stuff. And Daniel, true good point with your diversification. And there's a lot to be said about true diversification. And you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is CBDCs. Um, uh, you know, please be watching or check out our podcast for true diversification. And because when you know about how true diversification works, it is freeing and helping you to be able to understand. Most people become collectors rather than diversification. They think they're diversifying, but they're really just collectors. It's just a whole different realm. And watch for that. Well, we have a book we'd like to give you as we have to sign off here today. It's called Pirates of Manhattan, and by Barry Dyke. And this is a book that's going to be able to help you understand how to protect your money and be in better shape when these things happen that we've been talking about today. So we'd love to put this in your hand. The first 5 first-time callers at 800-725-7616. 800-725-7616. Call now. And we wish you, well, no, we don't wish you. We know that you can have a stress-free retirement if you invest for the I and not the G.